All right. I am now joined by more people than usual. So we have Jacobin deputy editor Micah Uetricht. We have producer Forrest, of course. We've got philosophy professor Ryan Lake. And we have Growing Downs Mutations host Jeremy Johnson, who is part of the reason that we thought to do this, because I saw he was doing something about Philip K. Dick, and made me think of doing this movie for the Livestream series, and because he's also somebody who is a so unfortunate, his last name, because there are those other natural sentences that just sound funny if you say it like this. But somebody who's also very into Dick, Jay and the World, our graphic designer.
I'll take it.
So,
wait, guys, we have to do this with no spoilers. Robbie is asking us to do this with no spoilers. So.
Yeah, I'm just going to say right now that's not going to happen.
Yeah, good luck with that.
I was watching.
You'll be almost done by the time the stream is over. Then it's on YouTube forever. You can just watch it after you see the movie. There will be spoilers.
I saw a clip from it. I was going back over clips before we did this, and there was an analysis that popped up, and they were a spoiler-free analysis. And I was like, how the fuck do you do that?
Yeah.
Yeah, for this movie especially, I have absolutely no idea. Yeah. New Path is growing the drugs. His superior is really at the Orange County Sheriff's Office is really Winona Ryder's character. There, it's done. You don't have to worry.
Oh man! Oh, you ruined everything. I still haven't watched this.
Yeah. So we're kind of saying before we started, one interesting, thing about this movie, it might be a good or a bad thing depending on, how you feel about the source material, is that there are, for some strange reason, there are tons of Hollywood movies that are nominally based on novels or short stories by Philip K. Dick. There's you've got your Blade Runners, your Minority Reports, your Total Recalls, and some of those are good movies. But one thing they all have in common is that none of them feel anything like whatsoever the source material.
The example that sticks out, only because I haven't read a lot of Philip K. Dick, but I recently, maybe about 5 years ago, I went and read Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. So Blade Runner has been one of my favorite movies for a long time. So I'm finally I'm going to go read the book. Absolutely nothing like that. It's a wonderful book, but just in completely different ways from the movie. It's just so, aside from characters with the same names, it's barely the same thing.
Yeah, right. And in that case, at least the plot is relatively similar. Is pretty, but it's also. I think that's a really unfortunate one, because a lot of people, if they want to read one of his novels, that's the one they'll read because they've seen Blade Runner, and so then they'll have this. What the hell is this? This isn't Blade Runner.
Yeah.
Although I think was it Marianne Williamson who said that she wants to see a Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep adaptation?
Ursula K. Le Guin. Well, maybe Marianne Williamson said that. I remember Ursula K. Le Guin saying it many years ago that she wanted to see a movie of Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. Yeah, I know about Blade Runner. I mean, a movie of Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep.
They're the same person, aren't they?
That'd be a wonderful twist if they were. But yeah, I mean, Blade Runner is a really, I mean, it's a good movie. It's an interesting movie. It's doing this the science fiction noir thing that it basically invented, and that in turn sort of led to the development of cyberpunk. All good stuff. Absolutely nothing like the novel, and the same is true for the the rest of these things that look, I remember seeing Minority Report in the theater and I enjoyed it, but I mean it feels absolutely nothing like Philip K. Dick. Whereas this movie actually does have the rhythms and the strangeness and the dark humor, and it feels very much like certainly like the novel, but like in general, it feels very much like all of Philip K. Dick's novels.
Mhm.
I've been listening to the Paul Giamatti audiobook of A Scanner Darkly, which is really a really amazing audiobook, but like listening to it, I guess, read in his voice, like it kind of like the cadences are the same in the movie.
Mhm.
That's kind of like like definitely like the narrative rhythms of like the dialogue and everything.
Yeah, I was listening to that too. It's great. Giamatti does a really good job. He was perfect. He was the perfect choice for that.
You know, you forget that Paul Giamatti can like do other voices besides like the one that he, pretty much does in every movie.
Yeah.
Fair enough. I'm actually tempted. I mean, I did read the book like I don't know, many years ago. I was still in Miami, but I'm tempted to go to listen to the Paul Giamatti audiobook anyway, because I'd love to hear what that's like. But I do remember, I know there's quite a bit of dialogue in here that's straight for the original. Like I remember in the original that line, which actually it sort of goes by quickly here, and you know, but they have a whole thing about it in the novel. The thing about like there was a neighbor who asked them to, there was some bug or animal, you know, probably an insect in her house, and they wanted her to take care of it, and then, you know, and then say, oh, it's harmless, and she says, oh, if I knew it was harmless, I would have killed it myself. Is a line that gets, you know, it, you know, is in the movie also. And
they do a really good job with everybody saying that at once too, like as if it's like their inside joke without like explaining the story, I guess.
Yeah. And yeah, certainly the thing that I thought was the best scene in the movie, which is is also the best scene in the book, is Freck decided to commit suicide, and he was burned on the drugs that he was going to use to commit suicide, and so he's having this vision of the being from between dimensions who's going to read him his sins from a giant scroll for all eternity. And after 1,000 years, he'd only got into the 6th grade, the year Freck discovered masturbation.
Yeah.
There's a lot of references to like the morality, I guess, of Catholicism throughout the book and throughout the movie, but
throughout Philip K. Dick's work.
Yeah.
That's just PKD's MO, right? Catholicism and science fiction. Three Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch would be a good one to go over. There's no film equivalent for that though, but that would be a film I would say.
Oh my god, I would too. Forrest, make it.
That's the end goal.
Yeah, so Philip K. Dick actually, you know, like obviously wrote lots of stuff that was not in the least autobiographical. Well, actually, that's not completely true. Like I think everything, even the things with like the really wild science fiction premises, there tends to be a character who like has like a menial job working at a record store or something that's like drawn from his experience. But he wrote lots of things that aren't very autobiographical. But I think that in the 70s, especially, you know, he wrote a lot, you know, several things that were very autobiographical. And that's when some of the religious stuff started to come in more, like he and his then wife, he was married like 12 times or something. I don't remember exactly, but, you know, lots of ex-wives, you know, I think Philip K. Dick was hard to live with. But he and whoever he was married to at some point in like the 50s or 60s, both, converted to, so they like joined the Episcopalian Church, but then like he had a very weird personal heretical version of Christianity that comes out in a lot of the later stuff, and he's sort of going back and forth on it in some of this. And of course, he was, he did have a drug problem, and he spent some time in rehab, which is apparently a big part of what inspired this. He did, like, as a, you know, fairly successful writer back when, you know, you could make a lot more money as a novelist than most people can now. He did have a house where he let lots of people, you know, come and hang out and do drugs with him and live there, you know, for a while. And apparently he had he got he was like in Vancouver, I think, doing some like speaking gig, and he had a breakdown. And the only rehab thing there was one that was specifically for heroin addicts, which was like the one thing that he'd never done, but and it was like very obvious that he'd never done because he was fairly overweight, but like he somehow managed to talk himself into to heroin rehab anyway. And then he got really paranoid in rehab, and that's part of what led to the premise of this. Like apparently, like when he was actually an addict, he was doing things like drinking like milkshakes like blended together with speed and things like that.
Well, this explains why the list of people that he knew who died or had permanent brain damage or whatever was so long at the end of the movie. I was like, how did he know all of these people who this happened to? I mean, this list is crazy long. So
yeah,
it's even longer in the book, I think.
Yeah, it's longer in the book.
And he throws himself into the list. They're still with the permanent pancreatic damage.
Living through any kind of drug epidemic, I mean, you do end up like I mean, because we're living in one now. Like, you know what I mean? Like the list of people that I either went to school with or have known or whatever that have died from some form of drugs is a lot longer than I think that people's would be if we weren't going through like a drug epidemic right now. I don't know. So it's like it's almost like I feel like especially like decades ago it would be almost like not underclass but like a underbelly, I guess, of society, but then at the same time, people who are like wildly famous and talented that are addicted to things tend to like congregate in the same place, which kind of explains like the speed addiction part of it, I guess. Because drugs like that, like, you can actually get a lot done. And manically writing, like it goes along with the territory, I think, in a lot of cases.
Yeah,
especially when you're time traveling, between the first century as a Christian and being persecuted by the Romans like he was as well.
Well, that's the other thing I was going to say. So he famously had in the 70s several religious visions. My favorite of which is that he had. It's mentioned, and there's a biography of him by Lawrence Sutton called "Divine Invasions." But my favorite of which is the one where he sees this like giant eye and this voice coming out of the eye that he knows is the voice of God, and among other things, it's telling him he needs to not do drugs. And he says, "No, I'm down to I don't do anything but smoke pot." And the eye says, "Yeah, that's okay. That doesn't count."
Yeah. Even God wants you to do weed. It's okay.
Or at least he's fine with it.
Yeah.
It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
I mean, if he didn't want you to do weed, he wouldn't have put it on the earth.
Yeah, exactly.
Just a plant, man.
Yeah.
Come on, man.
Natural.
It's a plant. It grows for the earth.
It begs the question, like, when it comes to weed, like, how did the first person decide that you could smoke it? Like, you know what I mean? Like, were they trying out a bunch of different things, and then they're like, this one's good.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the purity of the stoner thought, but I really can't let somebody misuse the phrase "begs the question" on this channel like that.
Yeah. We can't let that fly. That cannot fly. No.
Begging the question is the logical fallacy where you're trying to assuming what you're trying to prove. But in any case,
Forrest has been kicked out of the chat.
Not producing anything for this channel anymore. All because of the stoner thought.
You'd think philosophy professors would indulge, give you some latitude for stoner thoughts, but apparently not.
Love the stoner thought, but yeah, if there's one thing, if you ever want to make a philosophy professor angry, just use "begs the question" to mean raises the question. You'll piss off every single philosophy professor on the planet.
I don't know if anything's being raised by this question though. You know what I mean? It's kind of a flat, like a flat.
Even that's a good stoner thought too, actually.
Yeah. What did this question raise?
What else did they smoke?
May or may not have happened when I accidentally ate 3 edibles on Valentine's Day. I don't know.
Wait. Accidentally?
So there was like, I don't know. There were like strawberries that I didn't know were like made with weed chocolate that were like skipped. that were like a gift for somebody. And I just on Valentine's Day I ate 3 of them, like not not knowing that fact.
So, do you have a very good Valentine's Day or a very paranoid Valentine's Day?
A little of both, but that's kind of life in general, isn't it?
Fair enough. So, Scanner Darkly is about Bob Arctor, who works for the Orange County Sheriff's Office, which I actually think there's something kind of awesome about that. And like, he's not like, it's not like he's working for some like, like super secret government agency or even the FBI or the DAA. That's the Orange County Sheriff's Office. Which in some ways is actually a very prescient thing about this book, written in the 70s, that there is no unit of local government that's so local that they won't have access to crazy technology and surveillance and etc. But so Bob Arctor is his real name. Under his work name, Fred. He's working for them, and I guess they're very concerned. This is good because the last movie we watched was The Departed, and the Departed is all about double and triple agents between the organized crime and the police department. And so in this future, it says 7 years from now, they have come up with a solution, of sorts for that problem, which is that, I guess, in order to, or at least for a lot of the problems that you saw in The Departed, with, like who in the police department had access to the names of the undercover operatives and all of that, which is that nobody, like, except for maybe extremely high up, I mean, presumably somebody has to decide his paychecks, but nobody he's interacting with on a day-to-day basis is supposed to know who Bob Arctor is. He wears a scramble suit, which makes him appear to be a constantly shifting gray blur. And so the people he's immediately reported to don't know, or supposedly don't know, his real identity, which means that he can actually, in the sort of ultimate bit of Philip K. Dick paranoia, be assigned to spy on himself.
I mean, it's interesting that, when his superior, I guess, Jerry, or no, I think his name was Jerry. Like when he's talking to him and saying like, well, I don't want to know who you are. Like, you're going to be one of the people obviously showing up on the surveillance tape, but I don't want to know who you are. Like the paranoia of it, like he never really assumes that he's like, that they do know who he is. You know what I mean? Like he just kind of takes it for granted that they don't want to know who he is. And that's kind of I guess his brain is going slowly, but like, being super paranoid that he is going to show up on tape and then not thinking like, well, they actually probably already know who I am. Never really crosses his mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's that other element too, right? Where the paranoia and skepticism gets really ratcheted up, where he's investigating himself because his immediate superior doesn't know that he's Bob Arctor. So he's sort of like being told to check out, like, hey, there's this really sketchy guy, Bob Arctor. He doesn't check out quite right. Like, you should investigate him. So he's like investigating himself, and his superiors don't really know who he is. So there's this really kind of disjointedness right at the outset of the film, which is just great and paranoia inducing, just the way most Philip K. Dick tends to be.
Yeah, right. Like there's I don't remember which one this is, but there's some Philip K. Dick novel I read many years ago, which is like not one of the big ones, where there's a thing about how people who are being kept in like cryogenically frozen for decades that the one like tell is that like the reality they're experiencing while they're being frozen isn't real, is that there's this sort of soupy violin music that you can faintly hear in the background, because of, I don't know, I guess it's being played in the center or something, and this comes up in the plot, and then like there's a key moment, later on where the person who says this earlier actually starts to hear the soupy faint violin music in the background, and that's like a very typical Philip K. Dick kind of thing. So I guess relating back to all the talk earlier, both of philosophy class and stoner thoughts. But
this both the book and the movie of like just this one, like philosophy and stoner thoughts kind of intersect like pretty constantly.
Yeah, for sure. So Bob works. He has some kind of like nominal day job that he's supposed to have, which is also part of it. That this is part of the reason. At least it's very unclear at different points of the movie, how much this is true. But at least he's told that this is why they suspect him of being the person who's like not just a regular stoner like the other people in the house, but more deeply involved in the drug operation, because they gave him a cover job, but then like he doesn't show up to the job very much because he's really a cop, but they take him not showing up to the job very much as evidence that he's really involved in organized crime.
Well, also they're giving him large sums of money to do the drug deals and buy the substance D. So he shows up to these drug deals with large amounts of money and buys in ways that like somebody who was just working kind of once in a while at this like aluminum plant or whatever he's doing, like that wouldn't, like they wouldn't be able to do that. But then the thing is that obviously they're the ones supplying the money to him to buy the drugs in the first place. So it's like this weird
Yeah, I mean, in a weird way, the more we talk about it, the more I'm realizing this is actually kind of a tighter, like, very, very, very different in atmosphere and many other things. But in a way, the plot of this is a much tighter version of what The Departed was trying to do.
And much better.
Yeah. It's also just a better movie in general.
Yeah.
We should talk about the substance D. That's what the drug that they're all using. There are references to like regular drugs like we have. But
it's also cut with regular drugs that we have, like substance D is either cut with meth or heroin or something like that.
Yeah, and it's this is like the major science fictional conceit, other than the scramble suits and all that, and the souped up surveillance, is this drug substance D. It's a little unclear what the normal effects of it are supposed to be, at least to me. I mean, obviously it, we know a lot about the side effects, that it causes delusions. At the beginning you see, interested. At the beginning you see Freck, hallucinating aphids everywhere, and it causes dissociation, between the hemispheres of the brain, which is a big thing in the movie, since there's a certain point, Fred starts to refer to Bob Arctor in the third person. I know Bob Arctor, he's a good guy. But it's a little unclear to me what it's supposed to do.
Well, nobody's either seemingly very high up or very far down. Like they're paranoid and they're losing their minds, but it's not clear beyond that what the effects of the drug are, which maybe is a purposeful thing. I don't know.
I think that I don't know. I guess it would have to be something with unhooking your like the right and left hemispheres of your brain, obviously, which is like the ultimate effect of it. But I mean, assumably, like in that there's some, I don't know, like some connection to your brain that's like the synapses or something like firing in a certain way that I guess we don't understand with drugs that we have now. But it's interesting that it both seems to be cut with uppers and downers. So like that kind of also leads to the like the questionable nature of it. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it's sort of, in a weird way, it's sort of every drug.
Yeah.
So it's going to have the disadvantages of all of them, and it's incredibly addictive. Which I remember actually. So I think this is an interesting thing for us to talk about, because I have seen this movie a bunch of times before now, but this was the first time in many years. I'm not sure exactly how many years, that I'd seen it, and I think it hit a little bit differently for me, like partially just because like there's a horrific global pandemic going on right now, and I'm probably a little bit more depressed than I was the previous times I saw it. So but also because that I think also because COVID's going on right now in a weird way, I think that helped my suspension of disbelief, sort of by analogy, because the way they were talking about it was like the way they talk about substance D in the movie. Oh, there are no weekend warriors on the D. They're only addicts and people haven't tried it. I remember as much as I liked it, when I first watched it, I was like, yeah, that doesn't sound real, right? Like that sounds like sort of bullshit that people would say about every drug.
That's some just say no propaganda.
yeah, exactly. Like it's never actually true, right? Like there are absolutely people for everything, who are weekend warriors, whatever. There's the thing that Amber Frost always brings up about her friend who will like do meth once a year because she goes into a frenzy cleaning her house and she's fine and she doesn't use it in between. Like there are people like that for everything. But then I think this time I think I had a slightly easier time suspending my disbelief just because it's like, oh yeah, right. So this is like this is the COVID-19 of drugs, it's the sure, like any normal coronavirus, like any regular virus isn't going to do this, that, everybody has to stay in their houses for a year, but then, whatever, once every 100 years, something comes along that actually does. And it's like, this is the drug version of that.
I guess for me, it's kind of easy to suspend disbelief because of like the opioid epidemic and fentanyl going around. Because, a lot of the things like, oh, well, they get people addicted by just kind of like sticking them with it or like putting it in something and slipping it to them. And then they're kind of lifelong addicts. Like fentanyl kind of feels like that level of whatever, because, everybody that is on that eventually dies. And like, I mean, obviously, I guess some of this might be drug war propaganda. I mean, who really knows? Because like, you know what I mean? Like I've never touched anything like that. Like, but like the 100 times more addictive and powerful than like heroin or like other form, you know what I mean? Like that level of like that level of like a cloud of like darkness around it. You know what I mean?
So you weren't around after the TMBS live show. The rest of us took fentanyl.
No, I was like, gotta go, gotta take the train.
I've been watching Snowfall, which is a TV show about the rise of crack cocaine in LA. It's got like a CIA agent and like this smart kid who's learned how to cook it from RZA, and it's kind of taking me back, and like you were saying like it's like made of it's like all drugs, but then again also like crack cocaine, cocaine's speed, and but crack just knocks you on your ass. So, in a way, kind of, it's not that crazy.
Yeah. And I think that, so there is also an interesting tension in this movie between the way that there is this crazy science fiction premise, which is certainly like a big part of the plot of the movie, but also in a weird way, it doesn't, like there's a lot of the movie where the science fiction is almost beside the point, right? It's like essentially it's a grim hangout movie about, like people who are, doing drugs together and like having crazy, very realistic conversations, but also they're being slowly destroyed and killed by it.
And it's not a totally different world that we are taken to. It's like a pretty familiar one. In fact, when I was watching it, I mean, the novel is from 1977, I think, but this was made, as sort of the height of the Bush years. And I kind of felt that vibe of the thing. It's just like a really dark time to live in, not necessarily economically. Of course, this was like right before the housing crash. We were all living on borrowed time with the housing bubble at that point. So, and you don't sense that in the movie that people are like suffering economically, but people are definitely like suffering existentially, spiritually, like as a society, and complete with the appearance of our friend, good friend of the show, Alex Jones. I mean, like that and the sort of like the stormtrooper police who are everywhere, but like they just look like cops look, that looked then and look now, right? Just like decked out in riot gear and the sort of like the overreach of coming and showing up at the strip mall and beating Alex Jones's ass. And
Alex Jones must have loved playing that role. Like that's his. This is his fantasy. Like he's waiting for this to happen. Like
Well, I mean, he is playing a character, so
yeah.
Which was his defense. Like literally,
that's right.
Literally in court, he claimed that he was just playing a character. Which I would be fascinated to talk to some Alex Jones fans and find out how they rationalize that.
Yeah, that's right.
Does anyone know like the Alex Jones kind of timeline, like how this adds up to like? All right, so Richard Linklater is obviously from Texas, like famous.
Specifically from Austin, which is where Alex Jones was from.
So at one point, Alex Jones was kind of just like this public access style, like TV anchor that was making these documentaries. So I'm wondering, like in the conspiracy realm of it, like where this added up to, because obviously it was before like the InfoWars days of like completely trashing any hope of ever having like a mainstream reputation, like. You know what I mean?
Well, Alex Jones was in another Linklater movie a few years before this one too, Waking Life. Yeah.
Well, but he also had. I remember when I was in college watching an Alex Jones 9/11 conspiracy movie, a documentary that came out shortly after 9/11. So like Jones was already like doing his. He was moving beyond public access TV.
Yeah, he'd been a hardcore conspiracy theorist for several years by the time this came out. But I think it does go back to Micah's point about this being very much despite being a very close and very faithful adaptation of a novel written and published in 1977. This was, it's also very much a movie of the Bush years, and I think that I think Alex Jones being in it speaks to that, because even though, and this is why one reason it's a little bit of a shame that Doug Lain couldn't join us, because I know he'd be able to tell us more about this, but. Even though, like, in some ways, there's a lot of continuity over the course of Jones's career as a conspiracy theorist. And, like, if you were paying enough attention, I think even in 2006, you could see the very right-wing stuff at the bottom of the well. The political valence of Alex Jones, the way it was perceived, was completely different in 2006.
Yeah.
Because he was an anti-Bush guy, right? He was a 9/11 truther, and so
he was also the Bohemian Grove guy, kind of like, which was like something that captured like a massive amount of imagination. Which I guess I was just looking up like when that came out. It was 2000, but like I feel like the way that he's managed to bring people to the far right has completely trashed his reputation. Not as much, I think, like the conspiracy stuff necessarily. You know what I mean? Because there was kind of like a darkly conspiratorial age around 9/11 when he kind of came out doing that.
Well, I mean, I was an anarchist at this point, and I watched that movie, and I thought it was insane, but like it was telling that was sort of like being passed around among the sort of like punk anarchist kids in Western Michigan. Like, you should watch this shit.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, and even if you look at opinion polls from back then, like, I mean, it's kind of funny to think back to now, but like an astonishing percentage of Democrats like believed like some version of 9/11, truth or theory, like not like Democrats as names you've heard of, but like at the grassroots.
Yeah,
proto.
I spent a lot of the early 2000s arguing with friends and family that no, Bush did not knock down the Twin Towers. No,
I mean, every like anti-Iraq war event that I would go to when I was like in high school and then in college, somebody would get up and like ask, like, well, the real thing that we need to be talking about is the fact that George Bush was responsible for that.
There's a historical link. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, Ben.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, and like along very similar lines, like it's kind of hilarious, like now that like in the last few months, suddenly there are all of these popular right-wing conspiracy theories about voting machines, because in this era that was an extremely popular liberal conspiracy theory.
I actually got it from the Brad blog, which was the purveyor of a lot of the actual. I mean, like he actually researched the stuff. But the thing is, though, is they latched on to like these 15-year-old articles and like, oh, look what's going on.
Yeah, right. And so I remember seeing somebody like post on Twitter that like that it was like about how weird it was as somebody who'd been the poster had been an Air America call screener, in 2005, to be suddenly hearing all this stuff from Republicans now that just sounded identical, to all the old like liberal voting machine conspiracy theories. So yeah, I mean, Alex Jones was kind of always Alex Jones. Like I think his underlying worldview was always like poisonously right wing, but he wasn't necessarily perceived as Alex Jones. Certainly wouldn't be by some. I mean, I assume that Linklater is like a good left liberal, like but somebody like Linklater, like clearly wouldn't have perceived Alex Jones the way I'm sure he does now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, also just the Austin thing being like just like the kooky, conspiracy, public access guy. I think maybe would have like the reason that he's probably made so many cameos in Richard Linklater movies is that more than anything to do with the conspiracy theories parts of it. Like you'd find someone that like was on TV when you were like a certain age, and you're like, you know what, I'm gonna put this person in my movie because they were the kooky guy that I saw on TV all the time, and it's kind of like a
it's like a keep Austin weird thing, here's our zany local institution, Alex Jones.
There's like definitely a resonance or like a context for that, especially in PKD's life. There's two things to mention, right? Like he was writing during the Nixon era with the advent of the drug war. So there was that kind of context of the authoritarian government, conspiracy theory. Biographically, PKD actually allegedly he claims that the police raided his house and went through his stuff, right? So he himself was sort of living that sort of Berkeley conspiracy paranoia. And then, I'm just thinking and making a connection between Substance D and the whole like bicameral mind and Julian Jaynes. And I think Julian Jaynes' book on the bicameral mind came out in 1976, a year before the book. So maybe some of that inspiration, fusing together the drug war and then sort of the consciousness hippie culture in the 1970s kind of came together to help inspire this book.
Yeah, no, I think so. I mean, I think Philip K. Dick, like a lot of writers and people at the time, had tons of paranoia about Nixon, which a lot of which was borne out. That like there are, I mean, now that so much of the Nixon tapes are public, like I think you can actually listen to them talk about how how they should ramp up the drug war as a ploy for suburban votes and things like that. So like that's not wrong. And
it is brilliant though to speculate like what if we lost the drug war at a time when the drug war was just starting, because we're living in an age where the government and the CIA obviously played a big role in starting the drug war in the first place, and in the part like now we know in bringing the drugs in as well. But like it's very interesting to think like, oh, what if we lost the drug war, like law enforcement, like from the perspective of law enforcement, because at this point we have, like law enforcement, like the drug war is a failed war. Like everybody kind of recognizes that at this point.
Yeah. Right, for sure, and it is kind of funny, right? That you mentioning that about bringing them in, because like obviously, I mean, and in fact, like not very many years ago, like 3 years ago or something, there was that movie American Made, which is a very mainstream Hollywood movie. Tom Cruise is in it, where Cruise is playing Barry Seal, who's a real person in the 80s who was working for the CIA, flying guns down to the Contras and working for Pablo Escobar, on the return trips. And, they both kind of knew about each other. And it's kind of remarkable that we've gotten to the point where that wasn't even a big deal when that movie came out. It's like, oh yeah, no, that's like a quirky bit of the history of the Reagan era, that like, yeah, the same planes that were carrying the guns in one direction were carrying cocaine in another direction.
How much of that though is, I guess, what Jason was calling when we did the Judas and the Black Messiah thing, like the politics of containment, like how much of the kind of CIA as an evil force, like narrative in the Hollywood movies is us kind of containing like the CIA as evil but necessary, and the CIA as evil but like, you know what I mean, like containing that narrative in like like the CIA has obviously done a lot of fucked up things, but like they've also done like like they were necessary at the time. Like, you know what I mean? That narrative being pushed by Hollywood.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's some of that. Although honestly, I think Jay, my take would be that Jason is maybe being a little bit too optimistic in a weird way by thinking that they need to have this like very finely calibrated propaganda. I mean, I think that they're like, I don't think anybody's that worried about mass outbreak of anti-imperialist sentiment in the U.S. So I think you could just kind of make a movie about some of this stuff and like it's like, oh, that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So all right. So then there's also New Path is a big part of this movie. So New Path is this company that runs all of these drug rehab centers. And then crucially, its contract with the government means that they're immune from surveillance that exists everywhere else. And it's very culty, which again I think is something that in the context I was seeing, Jeremy Salmon was showing me some of the stuff that especially in the 70s in California, where Dick was writing. Like I think like very culty drug rehab places were a big thing at the time, right? There are a lot.
I think that's the Scientologist, because like Curtis Mayfield was had a bad drug problem, and they had the best drug rehab centers, but unfortunately it was also a recruitment center to get you in, which is why Curtis Mayfield was a Scientologist and why he left South Park. Was it Curtis? No, it wasn't Curtis Mayfield. I am sorry. Shaft. The guy in Shaft.
Yeah,
Isaac Hayes.
Isaac Hayes. Yeah. Thank you.
Sorry, my bad.
But
I got the wrong blaxploitation movie.
Yeah. But that was a I remember when that happened, and they Tom Cruise again. They had the. After Shaft died on the show, they had a funeral where the eulogy, they said, don't blame Shaft don't blame him for the decisions that he's made lately. Blame the cult that brainwashed him. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so
and by the way, not just Scientology, right? I mean, like the like Synanon, the famous drug rehab cult that sort of helped destroy the United Farm Workers. I mean, that stuff was really in the air.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I know a little bit about Synanon. I don't know the United Farm Workers connection.
Oh, that would take us down a whole other path. But Frank Bardicki writes about it in his master history of the United Farm Workers called Trampling Out the Vintage. And Cesar Chavez increasingly got involved in Synanon, and they're sort of like, they were a drug rehab center, but they also just had this kind of like culty vibe generally, even for people who were there to not do drug rehab. And it led to these very abusive practices within the United Farm Workers, and sort of Cesar Chavez demanding more and more centralized power and demanding sort of like ultimate, brooking no dissent from any of the organizers within the United Farm Workers, and these very abusive tactics through something called the game, which actually still live on in the labor movement. But again, I think that's a whole other hour-long discussion. But yeah, all of it goes back to this wacky, culty drug rehab center called the Synanon, which may still exist in California. I'm actually not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that, but yeah, I know that they do things like they once people, so it was all supposedly about tough love, but sort of have like essentially like group like trashing sessions, almost like I was like self-criticism sessions.
Yeah, that's what the game is, exactly.
Okay, yeah. And they would encourage people to like cut off links to like people in their lives previously, and they'd have they'd get people to like musicians who are in there to do albums for them to promote the group, which is it's just the kind of thing that not a lot of drug rehab centers do, but a lot of cults do. So,
were they the cult that Lucas cut for to have as extras for THX 1138?
I don't know this. How familiar?
Didn't know about that. No.
Yeah, there's a cult in Northern California, and I don't recall which one they were, but they were famous for having shaved heads. And so when he was filming THX 1138, Lucas went to them and just said, hey, I need extras. Could you guys, since you're all bald, just be in my movie? And so like they didn't even like dress them up because that's actually how they dressed in real life. Not really a great movie if you haven't seen it before, but if you're like a sci-fi fan, if you want to watch something really weird and kind of trippy, it's a little dull, but it's definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, well, speaking of weird and trippy science fiction, Seamless, I'm so proud of that. So New Path is runs all of these rehab centers, and what you sort of slowly get over the course of the movie is that various people who work for the Orange County Sheriff's Office are prepping and priming Bob Arctor throughout it for the idea that once he's sufficiently destroyed by Substance D, that they would let him in, that he can see if they are in fact growing the stuff as they suspect, and that maybe he'll, like, they said maybe a couple of charred brain cells, will spark, and the programming that they were giving him will kick in, and he'll do something to bring it to light. And one of these people who works for the Orange County Sheriff's Office is Winona Ryder's character, Donna, who I think is like loosely inspired by somebody that Dick knew. There's a very similar character in his novel Valis, Gloria. And then we should also talk about, just because it's so much of the fun of the movie, the other people in the house with him.
None of them being Matthew McConaughey. Like, why wasn't he in this movie?
I mean, Robert Downey Jr. is pretty great in it.
He's pretty. He's fantastic.
Yeah, he's one of my favorites.
Like you did.
Robert Downey Jr. is Barris, who is like a hilariously like real seeming character.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I mean, all the characters are like super real. Like the scenes where they're hanging out in their drug-fueled, paranoid, insane conversations. Just like I've been around these people. Like I know these people. Like it's just way too real. It's just.
I don't even think Woody Harrelson knew he was in a movie.
Yeah, I don't think so. No. No.
What?
It's like, Woody, you want to come hang out, do some drugs? Like, come on over.
There's that moment where he's first sitting there, like with the bong and stuff, and Barris brings in the bike, and Woody Harrelson, like you can see, like, because you can't really see who the actors are until they get up close because of the rotoscoping. But like you like all of a sudden, like it dawns on you that that's Woody Harrelson. Yeah, and it's like, oh, holy shit! Like, yeah. The reason that Matthew McConaughey wasn't in it probably is because like he would have played Woody Harrelson's character, and if you can get Woody Harrelson, why not get Woody Harrelson? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. All right.
All right.
That rotoscoping was just kind of weird because, like, I mean, I'm a big fan of now I'm going to forget his name. The guy who did Wizards and American Pop and Fritz the Cat. It's completely gone right now. But he kind of pioneered rotoscoping back, in the '60s with his animated series, because he did Spider-Man in the '60s, and then I think American Pop truly was like an absolute masterpiece of that kind of art form of rotoscoping. And so like this is weird because it was being done with computers, and it was done with like almost a vector-based type of graphics making, and it's like they're just tracing the image. Yes, Ralph Bashki. They're just like tracing the image with the computer. And I heard an interview where Richard Linklater was complaining about like how like it was hard to get all the animators on the same page, and you can tell that because some of them would actually go through and really make it look great, like those close-ups of Keanu Reeves in the suit. Mm-hmm. I think was like some of the best looking stuff in there, and then others just had like all these weird artifacts all over the place. And I mean, if you read Cory Doctorow in one of his books, I think it was For the Win, he actually kind of talked about how like people purposely would put in artifacts, like JPEG artifacts, into like carpeting in his future, in that story. But like at the same token, I'm just like sitting there watching this, thinking like it's weird how these artifacts are in there and how it kind of becomes part of it, and like it creates a unique texture of its own that also kind of separates you from what's actually going on, and it allows you to a little more seamlessly come in there with the special effects, because like would the alien from the other dimension who's reading the sins, would he have looked as great if he wasn't rotoscoped?
Yeah,
To match everybody else. So,
Exactly.
so like it was a really interesting call to see that, and I don't think as a experiment it was successful as a piece of art. But I think if somebody like picked up the torch and kind of continued with this type of rotoscoping, which nobody has, unfortunately, we could actually see some more interesting films in the future.
There was that series on Amazon, Undone. Did you see that? It was like just one season. It's really good. I don't want to spoil much of it, but it had some similar themes about the main character is questionable what's real and what's not. Similar to what you have going on here, and it's the sort of thing that like rotoscoping is perfect for this sort of thing, because you have that seamless blend between what's really happening and the really trippy stuff that's not really happening. And yeah, I thought Undone did a fantastic job with it. So it's like 10 episodes or something. It's on Amazon. Came out a couple of years ago. I highly recommend it. But yeah, it's really good.
Yeah.
Well, the rotoscoping also seems to, based on what we can gather from what we're seeing the characters experience when they're on the drug, kind of feels. It looks like you imagine it must feel like to be on the drug, which is not. There's not like wild, crazy shapes and crazy hallucinations happening at all times. It's just like there's just sort of like a hanging sort of ambient weirdness that's slightly unsettled, and then like every once in a while you'll turn and there's there's the guy at the foot of your bed with the
Robert Downey Jr. cockroach.
Yeah, exactly. It does happen, and the fact that the rotoscoping allows that to just sort of like happen, like
exactly,
naturally, unexpectedly.
Yeah.
I mean, with like acid or anything like that, like there's that kind of layer of everything that kind of like, you know what I mean? Like people like to put it in movies that like things jump out at you. Like that doesn't happen usually. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's just kind of everything gets boiled down to like almost like that kind of like layer of looking at everything with like that layer.
Yeah, I mean, I remember thinking that like was it the Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas movie did a pretty decent job. Like obviously there's some more extreme cinematic effects that I don't think anybody's going to have while actually tripping that happened in that movie, but like just the sort of regular like patterns like slightly rearranging themselves in weird ways, things like that.
Yeah, so it's definitely, but then you think about like what Substance D would be like, or something like that, and like seeing like those cockroaches and on all of those kinds of effects, like ramping it up to like a much stronger like drug in this universe that kind of destroys your brain. Like obviously those kinds of things probably would happen, but then like everything kind of being rotoscoped and like those patterns and everything probably are more like are closer to like probably a real life trip. So
I think too, that's the beauty of those artifacts I was talking about in the animation from the computer, which whenever I actually hand drew the poster thing, but then I made it look like I put in the artifacts into it, and I think that's actually helps with that trippy experience as bringing in those artifacts.
Totally.
Ryan, is that an actual poster you have behind you, or is that somehow?
I was wondering that too.
I don't want to spill my secrets on air, but if you look at the episodes, you'll notice every episode there's something different on the wall behind me.
It's always the movie that we're discussing.
Yeah.
Real heads know.
That's right.
Real GTAA heads. Or what was the one you came up with last?
Oh, the give heads.
Yeah.
the give heads. That's right. The give heads.
Yeah. So yeah, I think so. I mean, Woody Harrelson's character is, as you say, it's just kind of Woody Harrelson. You'd imagine the Robert Downey Jr. character, which is amazing, is I think Forrest, you said the ultimate "we live in a society" guy.
Yeah. Dude. because he's like, when they're sitting in the diner, he's like, I think we would all agree that this is a society descending into chaos or something like that. Like, he has a perfect line or declining, a society in decline. That's what he says.
Yeah, I mean, I think the perfect scene for Robert Downey Jr.'s character Barris is the one where Woody Harrelson is like choking on the floor, and you see him trying to help, but in the most incompetent possible way. He's not going to do the Heimlich maneuver. No. He's not like he's going to call 911 and very slowly and incompetently try to give them the description of where they are.
Yeah, I like when he goes, I've never actually had to send a piece of mail to this house. And he walks outside.
Yeah, he's all proud of himself because he's got the street number, but then he doesn't know what the street is.
Well, I kind of got like almost like a sociopathic thing where it's like he doesn't really care that Lockman's dying on the floor, but then he thinks about it and he's like, if somebody's watching me right now, like I need to show that I care. So it's like he's almost like miming empathy throughout that scene.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think he could be like just that much of a failure as a human being that like he just like this is the best that he can think of to do is to do this.
I guess the book, like listening to the book kind of colored my experience with that a little bit differently, because here's the scene where in the book Keanu Reeves' character is like he's like thinking to himself like, oh, he's gonna murder, like he wants to kill everybody around him by just kind of waiting it out. Like there's that line where he's like he's just gonna wait for them all to.
Well, I mean, they include that in the movie, but that also seems like Bob, Keanu Reeves' character.
Yeah, Bob Archer's.
Just becoming hopelessly paranoid. That he's like no, Barris isn't gonna he's not gonna kill you, but he's gonna just sit back until somehow a situation arises where you die.
Yeah, but it feels that way. But then finding out later that he's like actually like ratting on Bob Archer and everybody to the police to try to get like a more favorable outcome for himself, you kind of feel like is he actually kind of like more intelligently trying to throw everyone else to the wolves so he doesn't get thrown to the wolves, or like is that what I mean? Like I don't know. I guess it's unclear because you're kind of watching it through Bob Archer's eyes and
right.
Yeah, I mean, Barris seems like this kind of character that I've known. Again, these are all such real characters. Like a guy who is somewhat educated, somewhat smart, but he way overestimates his own intelligence, and so he bullshits and believes his own bullshit. So, like, I mean, like the whole thing about getting cocaine out of the suntan lotion, like, I mean,
I love that scene.
Yeah,
where he takes the blender of fruit and throws it in. He's like, "Oh, this is a very particular procedure." And he just throws that in the freezer. They never explain that.
I mean, I'm not going to name names on air, but I feel like Ryan and I both know a couple of people who it's very easy to imagine actually doing that.
Yes, it's way too easy.
Well, there's obviously that kind of person exists like everywhere. But then at the same time, his brain is in decline. So it's like an interesting juxtaposition in this specific case, because while he's kind of doing this like fake intellectual like intelligence thing, his brain is also fully declining from his substance D. So I got a kick out of that.
For sure. And I think he is a bit of a sociopath, which, I mean, the other people I'm referring to, but it's also like the line of dialogue that most sort of had the ring of truth to it in the movie. It was the one where Bob Superior at the Orange County Sheriff's Office, it's like, these dirtbags are always like reporting each other, like, like burning each other because of some like petty slight and like calling in like some tip about each other. And I've got to say that felt real to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And on the other hand,
in Wise Guy,
Barris is like, sorry. I was going to say, on the other hand, Barris is like of interest by the Orange County Police Department. They're like, no, that guy, like Archer is fine, but it's really Barris who we were interested in, which is surprising. Like, yeah,
he definitely should be. Like he's the one character I feel like that actually does like that should register on like if we're living in like a law enforcement state, like that guy is pretty much going to do anything that he can to like burn everybody around him.
Yeah, although I also wondered about that. So during made part of the movie. Keanu Reeves is being told to spy on himself. They think that he's told that they think that he's really up to something. And then at the end of the movie, when he's so badly burned out, his mind is almost gone. They say, no, okay, we know you're Bob Arctor, and process of elimination. There are not very many people in this house, and it's not very hard to figure out. And B, we knew that Bob Arctor wasn't really up to anything. Telling you to spy on Bob Arctor was really just a pretext for you to spy on Barris. And I wondered about that because, Winona Ryder's character, Donna, who turns out to be, his superior at the Orange County Sheriff's Office, has heard Bob do paranoid ranting about Barris. Right, mm-hmm. So she knows that this is a story that he would very easily buy, mm-hmm. And also, that is a good one. Follow up for Judas the Black Messiah in a weird way. It's a very weird it's a very weird clustering of three movies, but this
no, they're all very much interconnected.
Yeah, definitely.
Here's an idea for you, Ben. It's like a classics in paranoid American cinema. You could watch The Parallax View, and then you could watch movies like Judas and the Black Messiah that are you are correct to be totally paranoid.
Yeah, that's right. Or even The Departed, because as was pointed out when we did that stream, right? This Whitey Bulger, that really happened.
Yeah.
By the way, the guy that does the Parallax View podcast recently had the actual guy who helped write the movie Parallax View on his podcast.
JG Michael, right there. He's gonna be a guest on. I think what did we decide? Last Sunday of March or something. But for the Sunday night debate streams, we want to watch, if we can get a hold of it on YouTube. I haven't been too successful so far, but we want to watch G. Gordon Liddy's debate with Timothy Leary. Real thing that happened. But,
that's amazing.
But yeah, so anyway, it just seemed given that at least part of the plan was to get Keanu Reeves hopelessly addicted, so it would eat up his brain and he would end up in New Path. I'm not convinced that it was actually that they were actually having him spy on themselves to spy on in order to indirectly spy on Barris. I kind of thought that was bullshit, and that they were actually telling him to spy on himself because that would increase his paranoid confusion and grease the skids for him ending up in New Path.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah, well, it's the kind of COINTELPRO style stuff that we're talking about, where it's never directly throwing people. I mean, well, at some points it is, but there's all these indirect, how can we make these situations worse? How can we do whatever we can to make these situations worse so that the our desired outcome happens? So it's if he's the one agent that's already that far into a substance D addiction, how can we do anything we can to increase his addiction so we can get him to fill our ends?
Yeah,
but also it's a conspiracy too, because at the very beginning, remember whenever he calls up Donna to get more drugs, the person who's listening into the phone call says don't to ignore it, when plainly he's making a drug deal. So when in rewatching it, I kind of was realizing oh wait, this really is this secret project that trying to take down this company, and I don't think the rest of the police actually know what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, that could be. So that's also, I should also say, that reminds me, there's something that's it's just a few scenes, but it's very cleverly done. When he's at the sheriff's office, he's required to speak to psychiatrists. This is a very Philip K. Dick thing. He was obsessed with psychiatric tests, of the sort of old-timey pseudoscientific variety. Test yourself to see
the Rorschach stuff.
Yeah, like the Rorschach, and this comes up in a bunch of his books in one way or another. I mean,
Voight Kampf.
Exactly.
Yeah, Blade Runner, Android's
Yeah,
Dream.
which doesn't really come out clearly in the movie, but like the way in Android's Dream to Electric Sheep, the way that's supposed to show whether you're human or a robot is it's a test of empathy.
Yeah.
Now they just want to have him find all the dogs in the
which was a hilarious thing. They give him this Rorschach-like test. They tell him it's superior to the Rorschach because there's exactly one correct answer. And then it's like this shape that could be a dog or it could be a sheep. And they're like, nope, you're crazy. It's a dog.
And then all of them are irrelevant because he laughs. They're like, well, you kept your sense of humor, so
Yeah.
maybe you're okay, but we don't quite know, but maybe.
Yeah.
There's some good shots in those scenes with the doctors because they're talking about bicameralism and the different hemispheres of the brain, and they're kind of arguing with one another and looking at each other. So it's sort of like, I mean, I guess that was a little obvious, but it was kind of fun to see that play out.
I mean, funny you say it's a little obvious, but I felt so proud of myself that I actually got that on this viewing. You know,
I did not pick up on that, and you're totally right. Now you say it.
Yeah, because it's like, they're talking about the two hemispheres of the brain. They're two doctors, and every time they're on screen, they always make a big thing about the doctors either interrupting and second guessing each other or speaking in weird unison.
Right, staring at each other, like. Yeah.
They're both also like vaguely familiar actors and actors. You know what I mean? Like, so it's kind of like a strange scene because like it's not like they zeroed in on their features, I guess, throughout it, but like the fact that they were both like vaguely familiar in different movies to me kind of, I mean, I don't know if that was on purpose, but like it kind of played up like the strangeness of that whole interaction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I could buy that. So yeah, and then at the end there are these great scenes at New Path where Keanu Reeves is just this shell of himself. Like he's so far gone. Like he's doing all this. Like he's doing a lot of repeating things back to people. In the exact words that they just used to him. And this is why they decide that he is a good candidate for the farm, where they actually grow the drugs, because you have to be really, really, really far gone, for them to not be worried about putting you there and telling somebody.
Big of Mice and Men vibes though here, talking about the farm being like.
Yeah,
because I didn't know what was going to happen at the end, and they're like, "We're going to take you to the farm," and I was like, "Oh fuck, they're going to kill him at the farm."
Like,
nope, the drug. They're going to use his brain cells for the drug or something. Like,
nope, they're just going to use him for
labor.
Private slave labor. That's
it's just a good old fashioned capitalist arrangement there.
And petty mice in his pocket.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a nice little callback where you see Freck, who I don't think we've seen since the suicide attempt, with his head shaved, being part of like the rehab cult thing, like saying New Path slogans. And then at the very end, you see him actually out on the farm, and there's this perfect like evil corporate guy, villain, who comes out to talk to him, while he's doing farm labor.
The guy in the suit in the middle of the field.
Yeah.
The guy who not the guy in the suit, but the other guy was one of like the random people in Walking Dead. So like that kind of like for me like made the creepiness of it even more, because like I could see that it was that guy. So I was like that's the guy from Walking Dead, isn't it? And like
oh, what guy from Walking Dead?
I think I can't remember his name. He was like one of the minor characters that they when they first get to, hold on, I'll find the guy's character name, because he wasn't like a big character, but he was like in a bunch of scenes. Fair enough.
Yeah, that and of course I've still got The Departed in my head. So when you were saying, "Oh, not that guy, the other guy," I was thinking of about Matt Damon, I'm the guy who does his job. You must be the other guy. So, final thoughts, Ryan.
Good movie, very good movie. Yeah.
All right, got the concise Ryan Lake review. Andy.
It's not my favorite Philip K. Dick movie, but it's definitely my favorite Philip K. Dick book. At least of the one.
Wait. What's your favorite Philip K. Dick movie?
It's probably just Blade Runner, but I will sometimes say Scanners just to throw people off because it's kind of underrated and not a lot of people seen it. But it's not really. It's better than it absolutely should be, but it's a fun.
Scanners is great, yeah, but Blade Runner is the correct
I'm
answer.
sorry, what am I saying? Scanners, Screamers.
Oh, Screamers! I don't know Screamers.
Screamers, yeah, it was 1995. Peter Weller. It's set in the future on a planet where there's this war between Earth and a corporation, and they deployed nukes and they created this ultimate weapon. And it actually is really interesting. It's the guy who wrote Alien is the screenwriter for this.
Scanners is the Cronenberg movie where people's heads are blowing up.
No, but Screamers.
I'm gonna say there's another Scanners. There's another Philip K. Dick scanner. Like, is that Scanner Lightly and this is Scanner Darkly?
Yeah, which is also, of course, is goes back to the thing about Christianity, since that's a the New Testament reference, right? We see as through a glass darkly. So it's the scanner darkly. But okay, I mean, I both despise and respect that move of of doing the thing that you have to do, where like you have you're talking about what your favorite Radiohead album is, and you can't say "Okay, computer," even though it's everybody's actual answer because the rules of the game are that you have to,
no.
Have to pretend.
In Rainbows. In Rainbows is the best Radiohead album.
It's tough. In Rainbows is really
I won't argue
fantastic.
with that. I won't argue with that.
You also can't trust my opinion on this because I only started liking Radiohead like 4 months ago.
Never
I
mind.
spent my whole life disliking Radiohead, and recently,
invalid.
This would be an interesting time to start liking Radiohead. I'm just imagining sitting in quarantine doing that thing you have to do with Radiohead, where you have to listen to the album 10 times to really get it.
It's really funny because there's a philosopher I'm friends with on Twitter, and she also just got into Radiohead. Like, she's been tweeting about it like in the last couple of months. Like, she's like, oh wait, I've always hated Radiohead, and now I realize they're amazing. So I think there is something about the quarantine, the pandemic, that is just perfect for getting into Radiohead.
That, and it may have had something to do with the fact that about a year ago, for the first time in my life, I really started seriously smoking weed. I don't know.
Weird time to start getting into weed too. I don't know.
Listen, by any means necessary in this shit, man. I gotta get through this somehow.
Drugs and to get into really depressing indie rock.
They go hand in hand. I don't know.
Oh, Forrest.
I guess the one thing quickly that we didn't touch on that I kind of wanted to with this is that he kind of the other foresight that wasn't, I mean, it may be apparent in the 1970s, was how rapacious and evil the for-profit rehab industry. I mean, obviously the cult connections, but there's also the connections to just people creating those halfway houses in Florida where they have very little oversight, and halfway houses and rehab clinics everywhere that they have very little oversight over them, no regulation, and they kind of a lot of times just slip drugs in it to keep it as a cycle of addicts go in, addicts come out, addicts go in, addicts come out. So interesting that New Path is his kind of version of that in the 70s, late 70s.
Yeah, right. Because it's sort of it's a little bit like Synanon, but it's also it's also it's like the Walmart of Synanon. So final thoughts. You don't have to be Ryan level concise, but
I can't say I enjoyed it. It was okay. It wasn't great. I appreciated some things about it, but I kind of wanted more of everything. I wanted more about the evil corporation. I wanted more of a bunch of stuff. But I did appreciate the thing I said, sort of this capturing the vibe. I mean, I'm sort of like obsessed with like, because it was the years where I went through was a teenager and became an adult, of the vibe of like the Bush years and how dark of a time that was, like culturally and politically and in basically every way. And I do feel that the movie really captured something of that, and so you gotta hand it to a movie that can do that.
Yeah, that's the connection I'm making, I guess, is the 1970s Nixon era and then the 2000s Bush era is just kind of making that sort of cultural connection, and the film coming out when it did. I can't say it's my favorite PKD adaptation. It's one of my favorites, probably top 5. I think, like you, Jay, it's also Blade Runner for me.
Correct.
And yes, and I have to say, Total Recall is a very guilty pleasure as well. So
amazing.
Yes.
That was my 13th birthday. That movie my dad took me to go see. So
yeah.
10
was RoboCop. 13 was Total Recall.
There we go. I think we should do a free album. I think that'd be a lot of fun, especially since it's a kind of a more eccentric indie film, and it really kind of takes the high weirdness of Valis up to the next level and faithfully tries to adapt it to the indie
really
screen.
Good.
Yeah,
that'd be really good. Like I haven't seen it, but but that be a good excuse to. I mean, I was really I was fairly obsessed with Valis, for a long time. I had so this is the out of the sort of, let's put it this way, the things that make Scatter Darkly, I think that's the Philip K. Dick novel that's the most like that. That it's more Scatter Darkly-ish than Scatter Darkly is, and it does essentially revolve around the religious stuff. And I'd read it like as a teenager, and I enjoyed it, but I also didn't quite know what to make of it. And then I read it again, after dropping acid for the first time in my 20s, and I was like, oh my god, this is like the best book ever. And I've read it a couple times since then, and I've had the thought many times that I really want Richard Linklater to do a rotoscope Valis Valis movie. Which if it hasn't happened yet, it probably won't happen, but we can for sure do radio free album. But I guess I would say, I mean, at the risk of being that hipster contrarian who pretends that In Rainbows is his favorite Radiohead album, that this actually is my favorite Philip K. Dick movie. I mean, just because I like Philip K. Dick so much, and this is the one that feels like it. But anyway, glad we for the excuse to watch this again. And even though it was totally unplanned, I'm glad we'll watch this again right after watching The Departed and Judas and the Black Messiah.
What direction are we going in next for movies?
So that is a good question. So last week, Bester was saying he wanted to come back in 3 weeks, which would be 2 weeks from now, to see I'm not like one of these people who can't count the speeds on the bike. 3 minus 1 is 2, and to do Gags of New York. But as far as
wait a minute, I think you got to get Bester on to talk about Ghostbusters, man.
Oh,
yeah. Well, he's supposed to hit up Matt Christman to see if he wants to come on with him to do something about the Slimer Muncher. I hope that happens. I mean, obviously, all 3 of the people who wrote that article have been guests on here in the past. So, hope we can get that together, at least 2 of them, to talk about that. But yeah,
that would be a really fun episode if it happens.
For sure.
I mean, arguably the best article Jacobin has ever published is Muncher and Slimer. my current favorite.
Muncher and Slimer, no question about that. But yeah, no, it's an amazing It's an amazing article. I might even go along with that. It's not a.
That's my In Rainbows argument. Oh yeah, that article, best thing Jacobin's ever published.
Yeah, I mean, for the last 5 minutes, I've been trying to figure out, like, if I did that, if I wrote some essay about the about Scanner Darkly and Judas and the Black Messiah and The Departed, would Jacobin print that? I don't know.
Listen, man, if you can make me laugh, I'll publish it. Sure, why the fuck not?
Fair enough. All right. Really appreciate all of you guys. We'll talk off screen about what to do for the next one. But yeah, really enjoyed this. Thanks everybody. Left is best.
Thanks, guys.